This is my first video for business model innovation, talking about the article, The Hard Truth About Business Model Innovation. So, we're going to begin with what are the four elements of a business model. There are four pieces to this. We start with value proposition, there is resources, processes, and profit formula. Getting a little bit more into each, we have the value proposition. This is what you are bringing to customers, this is the job to be done. The next is resources. This is the people you have, the technology, the cash, kind of the resources behind how you're going to actually build your business. Three, with processes, this is think an assembly line. How you get from point A to point B to C, kind of how the processes start and how you actually use your inputs then and convert them to outputs for the customer. Lastly, we have the profit formula. This is where we get more into the money, asset velocity, where we have different metrics and just the different formulas needed to create attractive returns for the business. The four elements are broken into priorities and capabilities. Your capabilities are your resources and your processes, and your priorities are your value propositions and your profit formulas. In my opinion, I think the most important elements of the business model are your priorities. And I would say that the majority of that comes from the importance of the value proposition. In my opinion, this is the bread and butter of your business. You have to have a good value proposition in order to attract customers, in order to really get your business off the ground. You have got to have a good idea that speaks to people, that directly targets a certain customer base or consumer base, and then can go from there. But like I said, the value proposition, this is the core of your business. This is why you're doing what you're doing. And this is kind of, like I said, the bread and butter, the most important piece. And then along with that, once you have that value proposition, the other priority being profit formula. Once you kind of get that value proposition working, you then need to have good profit formulas that keep you afloat, that actually make your returns strong and are able to help you stay in business by generating positive cash flows and enough money to then reinvest into the company. And all those numbers come from the profit formula. So I would say those two factors, the value prop and the profit formulas, those two are the most important elements. You obviously need your resources and your processes, but those can kind of get tuned in, I think, over time. Whereas I do think that the value proposition really has to be strong from the start and really has to get you started off on a good foot. There are three stages to business model innovation. We have the creation stage, the sustaining innovation stage, and then efficiency. So, creation, as kind of the name goes to show, this is the job to be done. This is when you're creating your idea, the value prop. This is kind of the initial stages of the business model. This is when there's lots and lots of questions being asked, not as many answers or solutions, but just lots of different ideas, trial and error, until you really find that core business model value proposition. And then from there, also in the creation stages, is when you start to gather your resources and kind of bringing in your people and your technologies and the different resources that will be needed to make that value proposition come to life. The next stage being sustaining innovation. This is when we start to answer some of those questions that we first asked in the creation stage. This is when we start to kind of innovate some more, but also stop kind of asking new questions, but really hone in on some of our solutions. And this is when processes start to form. So this is when we start to go from point A to point B, and now we've gotten that down pat and we figure that out, that now that's become a process, and we continue to innovate on that process. This is when the voice of your customer base starts to actually outweigh the voice of the job, which was really loud in part one in the creation stage. And then we get to the last stage, which is efficiency. This is when profit formulas come into play, and you really are wringing out all the possible efficiency you can get from your processes to get them as kind of sturdy and efficient as possible. This is when flexibility kind of starts to go out the window and your processes kind of get a little bit more concrete. And you're really just trying to get as good as you can from getting from point A to point B to C, and getting that as quickly as you can. And again, trying to now get the best returns, maybe the lowest cost, when all those different kind of profit formulas and numbers and those metrics really come into play. And this is when those interdependencies between your different stages come into play, and how value proposition works with resources, and resources works with processes, and processes works with profit formula, and vice versa. How they all kind of work together, and those interdependencies between them get really hardened. And like I said, that flexibility kind of starts to fade away as the efficiency starts to build up. Brand is called The Toast. It's actually a podcast that also has kind of a social media presence, obviously, has merch. They do on tour, but their kind of main idea of their business is their podcast on YouTube and on Spotify. And I think that they're in the sustaining innovation phase. I actually think that they kind of went back into that phase from just what I've learned so far about the business model stages. They kind of had their what worked for them for a while, and then they actually rebranded a few months ago from the Morning Toast, and now they are just the Toast. I know it seems like a small difference, but they are targeting a new demographic. They used to kind of go after millennials, and that's what their whole show is about to begin with. And I think they talk about now how they like to target Gen Z, and I think that's really created a lot of questions for them, and needing to find new solutions and finding ways to get kind of new customers, and really just start to ask questions all over again and find new solutions. I think they had kind of wringed out all the efficiency from their previous kind of branding and all of that, and now they are kind of going back a step to try to innovate some new ideas and reach new audiences and target different consumer bases through upgrades in merchandise, and kind of following different trends that are on TikTok and Instagram that some younger followers would now be interested in. And it's actually super cool to see how their platform has grown in like hundreds of thousands of followers within the last like 6 months to a year, as they've kind of done this rebrand, and you've seen kind of noticeable changes in what kind of content they make and stories they promote on their show and whatnot. First implication for business model innovation that I think is really interesting and important to know is that once you have a business model that is efficient and works really well, the only way you can really incorporate new innovations to that is if they are a perfect fit. And rather than trying to force kind of a square peg in a round hole, it's actually better just to create a whole business model, business like unit in addition to that one you already have, which I think kind of seems counterintuitive sometimes. You'd think, oh, we already have this whole process in place. Why don't we just kind of do some tweaks and fixes and make this new thing along with it? But actually that ends up not working out as well, because it kind of messes with how those processes work and what the interdependencies are. So I think that implication is really important to learn about and to know, is that sometimes it actually is more efficient and more useful just to create a new business unit rather than forcing the two together. I think the other implication that's really important is that the biggest risk to businesses and business models and innovation in general is people's fear of taking risks. I think it's really important that you can recognize when you have a business model that's working really well and is very efficient, and when to know that it's not your time to innovate in that one, but to create something new and not be afraid to do it. So this kind of builds off the first implication, but it's really important to know that you can't be afraid to take risks, or you're going to be stuck in the past, and you're going to be stuck in doing things how everyone else does them, and eventually you're going to be left behind because everyone around you is going to innovate. And if you are too afraid to take the risk and take that next step, then you're going to kind of lose out on those customers and be left behind from everyone else.